So here we are at the lovely Country Inn Suites in Salt Lake City, West Valley to be exact. And another boring afternoon. I went for a walk. Got some stuff to hold me over while I'm in here. And I've been doing a lot of reading. Two of the books that will open your eyes to the matrix of the world we live in right now, that you can read are these two right here. See, the one is the Gospel of Barnabas, and the other one is Signs of the Last Day in the Modern Age by Imran and Hossein. Imran is a scholar who is well versed in economics, geopolitics, and world history, and he's a very knowledgeable man. If you read this book, this one here will open your eyes and make clearer a lot of things he touches on in here. I said in one of my last videos, I don't agree 1000% with some of the things Imran Hossein says, but for the most part, I think he's right on when comparing hadith with events that are going on in the world today. And the ultimate guide is the Quran. So you have to have the Quran also. But these are good companions, especially the Gospel of Barnabas to the Quran. Imran Hossein has a lot of people who disagree with him because he refers a lot to a Sufi background, and I can understand their apprehension with that. And one of the things that is apparent to me in maybe his ideas on some things could be refined is if he would look more into the Shia belief of 12 Imams and their interpretation of some of the things in the Hadith and in the Quran. For the most part, whether you're Sunni, Shia, or Sufi, you agree that there are certain Hadith that are considered absolute when it deals with the signs of the last times. So there is a common thread for everyone to touch on, but like Imran Hossein talks about the Sufi, what's the word? Eschatology. Their ideas of penetrating reality and seeing it in truth, as opposed to what people just see and believe with their intellect and their what they see for themselves is it's a better understanding and observation of the world around. And if they have that belief that the average believer can, and I think any sort of knowledge and stuff comes with constant prayer and fasting, and reflection. and asking for guidance from Allah. So, but that being said, the Sufi and Imran Hussein's, belief of getting Nur, spiritual sight, and that anyone who seeks it can obtain it and have better understanding. I believe that's true, but also I say, well, if you believe that, then why not believe that the Imams were infallible with their knowledge and that they were walking Qurans and they had special insight? So I don't think you can affirm the one that, all believers can seek and obtain Nur and spiritual insight, and that you can deny that the Imams would have had this insight and understanding that came from Allah, ingrained in them to be guides for mankind. And a lot of this in here, deals with, in the end of Imam al-Mahdi returning and being a descendant of the Prophet. And if you accept that, then why don't you accept the fact that the Imams and descendants of the Prophet in between were truly meant to be guides? Why would it skip over so many and then reinsert a descendant of his, peace be upon them all, in the last days? And it also talks about there being a dispute and the death of a caliph, and he has some hadiths in here that the Prophet, peace be upon him and the blessings of Allah upon him, said, according to hadiths, of how there would be corrupt rulers of the people of the Muslims, and that would be signs. And I don't know how much more corrupt you can be other than the ones that sent armies after Imam Hussein and were considered caliphs. So I don't know, how much how you can say there's going to be, you're looking for it in the end times, and I think some of that has already happened, because I don't know how much more corrupt you could be than to want to kill or imprison the descendants of Imam of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when there are hadiths that are pointed to that says he named those descendants of his that would be Imams, and there's hadiths that say, he woke from dreams, crying that his own ummah was going to kill his own flesh and blood. So, the history of the corruption of the caliphate, I think, goes back, and it's not just something that's going to happen in the future. And I think, my personal opinion, looking at history, and this is, in this book, Imran goes into how different religions and societies believe history is, whether it's linear or cyclical, and this and that, and in the Hindu beliefs and stuff, they see a cyclical cycle, and they're waiting for truth to manifest to prove that their right and their position is, and that India is a holy land for them, just like the Jews say Israel is for them. But I don't believe it's cyclical, but I believe there are lessons that in history where Allah allows the same thing or similar to the same thing to happen, so that future generations will wake up to what's going on around them, because they will see it. Same thing happened. Whether it's 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 years ago. With respect, there's a sort of a constant theme that gets played out, and maybe each time it's to show mankind or wake them up. So you can see with with Moses, peace be upon him, Pharaoh sent to kill all the Hebrew children, because he was told there would be a prophet that would come from them. But Allah, all praise to him, is the best of planners, and Moses was saved and then raised in Pharaoh's own household. So, and then you can see at the time of Jesus, Herod, I believe it was Herod, but they wanted to he wanted to know where the birth was going to be and stuff, so he could put a stop to it and kill Nabi Isa before he was born. But Joseph was told to take Mary and leave the land. So you can see that. And then before the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there was an army that was going to go and wipe out the people in the village or town he was going to be born in, and Allah stopped that from happening. So you can see there are certain themes that happen over and over, and then you can see the lineage of the prophets, in between there were their descendants who were the imams, or who were left in charge, like Aaron to Moses, and then you had Solomon after David. So there are constants. As a guide, we can say, hey, it's been this way so many times before, that why would there all of a sudden be some kind of change where it just goes totally different course? And so you can see also Jesus, Nabi Isa, peace be upon him, said, in the end times it'll be as the days of Noah. And so you can see that theme, the sinfulness of the world, will replay again. And there's more about that, explaining the days of Noah in here, which coincides with the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, who explains some of the immorality and types of things that will be taking place in the last days. So, all that being said, all praise to Allah. Everything is on His time schedule. And there have been times in history before, you can go back and see, where people said this is definitely going to be the end and stuff, and it's right around the corner, and that was 1,000 years ago or whenever, And I'm not just speaking of, the phony Christians who don't know what they're talking about anyway. And even in Islamic culture, and there have been people who have claimed that they were Imam al-Mahdi, and in the past, and the scholars say, they just didn't fit all the criteria and stuff. And the most recent was in, I think, 79 or so, there was a Shia group who took over the Kaaba in Mecca and barricaded themselves in there with a bunch of people, and the Saudi security forces had to go in. And, it was quite a distressing and disturbing time for everyone involved in that situation. Because, what are you going to do when somebody comes and says they're Imam al-Mahdi, and you don't want to attack somebody like that. If the chances are, if there's a chance, it is Imam al-Mahdi. But you can't have a phony claiming to be either. So, and I think there's a hadith that said there will be a certain number of fake ones. But so that was, either were scholars who the Saudi government was asking them, what do we do? And they were like, we don't know. Because they were in fear that if it was Imam al-Mahdi, they did not want to be on the wrong side. So, but eventually all those people were killed, and it's one of the things Sunni and Salafi have against Shia, is because they keep getting these groups who are kind of extremists in their own right, and do things like this. And to me, Imam al-Mahdi, when he speaks, people will know by the words he speaks and how righteous he is that he is Imam al-Mahdi, because he is a righteous man. The hadith says he's in one night he will gain knowledge and understanding and wisdom from Allah, and will be made aware of who he is and his purpose. And some people mistranslate that, that he's not even living a righteous life, that he's kind of living a sinful life and is not religious at all or anything like that. And that's wrong, because no descendant of the Prophet is going to be living a sinful life. So, and they're showing 9/11 on the History Channel there. That's a whole nother story, and the Matrix on that. But anyway, Imam al-Mahdi is not a sinful man. He's not living a corrupt life. And if you follow 12er Islam, they say he was born and he's in occultation, which a lot of people differ with, because they don't see how he could have been born and then gone into occultation, and then he's supposed to reappear at a certain time. And in some Shia belief, you can ask this Imam for to make intercession for you, because he is alive. Like even in the daily prayers, you ask Allah to give the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his eternal rights of intercession over the Ummah, now and on the Day of Judgment. So, and they say that those, like in the Quran, it says those who have died in the cause of Allah are not dead. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is not dead, just like we know Jesus, peace be upon him, is not dead. And so then the Imams are not dead either. And that in Shia Islam are accused of worshipping the imams, and more saint worshipping, which that's not permitted. Allah is the only one worthy of our praise and devotion. But the Shia say that you can, if you go by the graves of the Prophet or any of the imams, you can wish them well, and that they'll get the message, because they're not dead, and that there's a line of communications where their graves are. That I don't know exactly how it works, if the angels convey the message or Allah Himself, but that your salutations are accepted from them, from the grave sites, and that's why whether it's Karbala or any of the other places where an imam is buried, that people go there to wish the imam well, and then to also ask for intercession, because they are alive and they have communication with Allah. So that's not worshiping them. That's not giving them, you're not asking them personally like Christians do. They ask Jesus to do for them. And Shia, from the scholars I talked to, and they all admit could be a dangerous thing. It could turn into, the wrong thing, where people just ask the imams, and that's not how it's supposed to work. You ask the imam to make intercession, but you don't ask the imam to grant you something personally, because then you're giving them the attributes of Allah to be able to manifest things for you. And we know from the Quran that only Allah is able to do all things, and to intervene and to make changes. And He does so upon, your request, and He also does so plenty of examples where people have asked prophets while they were here on earth to be blessed or have somebody healed and stuff, and they did so with permission from Allah. They didn't do it on their own. So that's the basis of Shia thought and belief in intercession, and how you're not supposed to worship anyone but Allah. You're supposed to give Him all your praise and devotion, but that you can, if you're at a place, a grave site of one of the saints, that you can ask for their intercession, but more importantly, you wish them salutations and peace and blessings of Allah, would be, my major thing I would suggest, because we all tend to ask for everything under the sun, and even though we don't know what's best for us. So I would say, give salutations and ask for guidance from Allah, and ask for forgiveness from Allah, and that He guide you, and because none of us know what's right for us, even though we think we might, in many cases. Anyhow, so these two books, I would say, are suggested reading. Like this one here, there are some differences that people will point to and say, see, that proves it's not true. Well, I say it might not be 100% correct in everything, but you can tell. You have to compare with the other scriptures, because like the Quran says, it confirms the scriptures that came before it. So people would think, the Bible, the New Ted, the gospel there because it says it confirms the gospel, the Injil, and the Torah. But we know that the Bible has been corrupted, the Torah part and the Injil, the gospel. So what's it confirming then? If those things are wrong, because the Quran condemns calling Jesus the Son of Mary, it condemns calling him the Son of God. He's the Son of Mary. It condemns calling him the Son of God. It condemns calling him God. And so the Quran cannot be confirming, at least cannot be confirming all of what's in the Bible, because a lot of the Bible is false. It's been altered. So what's it confirming? And if you read this, it makes a lot more sense that the Quran is confirming this version of the gospel. And it's the Quran also says Christians will be the closest in affection to the Muslims, to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Muslims. And you look at world history, and it's like I don't see much love coming from the Christians for Muslims at all. And so what's it talking about? Well, in the Gospel of Barnabas, it says, Jesus says there will be a scant 30 of his true believers at the time of the rising of the prophet. And it was those who confirmed that the prophet was indeed the prophet that Jesus had said would come after him. And they were definitely on the side of the Muslims, and had the most affection for the Muslims. And many Muslims in today's world don't know this. They say, oh, it says Christian, and they see all these people who say they're Christian. But those aren't Christian in today's world, not many anyhow, because most are polytheists and call Jesus Son of God or God, and believe the Trinity and stuff. And those are polytheists. Those aren't the Christians. And those polytheists, some of the 30 that Jesus, peace be upon him, said would be left, were mixed among some of those, because in the Quran it says Allah would destroy them except that there was true believers amongst them. So that means some of these true believers, were having to keep their faith secret, because they were mixed into this polythesis, system, and they couldn't, stand out, because otherwise they'd be killed or persecuted. And so they were mixed in amongst them and just kept in their hearts their true beliefs. And and then it says that there were some who were monks and stuff, and just moved away from civilization totally. And if you look at the book of Revelations, it kind of touches on that there were those who were persecuted for their true testimony of Jesus, that he said to worship Allah, and that was his faith, and that, he was not God. That's the true testimony, and so then you look at the Council of Nicaea, which happened, 300 years after the time of Jesus and the apostles, declares that anyone who does not accept the Trinity and the cross and the death or resurrection was a heretic, and they should be killed. And that's in the Council of Nicaea. So you can understand, the 300 years before the time of the prophet, that decree went out, that those who did not follow that decree were heretics and should be killed. So for 300 years, these last Christians, true Christians, were in hiding in many cases, waiting for the time of the prophet to come. And then they confirmed he was the prophet that Jesus, peace be upon him, had prophesied about. So that makes the storyline a little clearer, because it can be confusing, because you read that in the Quran, that Christians are closest in affection, And then you see all the awful things they say and the things they've done in history, the Crusades and so many other things. And Imran Hussein he's kind of saying that it's the Orthodox Christians who are closest in affection, but there's been times when there has been strife, and he says it was instigated on purpose through the Dajjal system, the Antichrist system. But I don't believe in the Quran, when it says the Christians will be closest in affection, that it refers to any of the polytheist groups, whether they are Orthodox or Catholic or Protestant. I believe it refers to these true Christians that Jesus, peace be upon him, said would be remaining. Now that's not saying someone like Mother Teresa or some Orthodox group somewhere or something has no malice at all for Muslims and the religion of Islam. I'm not saying, that there's not a possibility. There are small groups who are just more peaceful and preach tolerance and acceptance and equality between Muslims and Christians, and they might be total pacifists even with everything in the world. But I truly believe that verse in the Quran was specifically talking about the true Christians who Jesus said would be left at the time of the prophet. That's what I believe that verse refers to. And that it's not referring to the polytheist Christians who denounce everybody and everything that does not believe like they do. So anyway, you can get a better understanding of all things. The Quran is the final word on everything. So like in here, it has the manger story. In the Quran, it says Jesus was born under the date palm. And so the Quran is the correct version of that. So anything that you read and you go through, you have to double check with the Quran, and you have to know that you're using the right verses in comparison to other things. So if you're a new Muslim or you're thinking about becoming Muslim, you have to understand the Quran was sent down over a 20-year period. And a verse in the Quran says, it was to sustain the Prophet and the believers' hearts, that it's such a weighty book that, at first it was offered, to the mountains and stuff, and everything quaked at the presence of the Quran, and then that, mankind took the I don't know if the right word is challenge, but accepted the responsibility, to receive it. And so you have to understand, you become a Muslim, you read a few things, you think you understand everything, and you might have somebody teach you some things that are wrong or a wrong theology. I'm telling you to use care, read, study, reflect, look at a number of sources, because especially here in America, if you're black, maybe you, sway to Farrakhan's version of Islam, and you never look at anything else. Well, you're shorting yourself on a wealth of knowledge and understanding. If you just go by what he's teaching, and the same if you get into some Salafi teachings and beliefs. And there's a lot of people who are very knowledgeable, and I'm more apprehensive because coming from the Christian background, You know, you see these preachers and they can rattle off, you know, like they have the whole Bible memorized, and they'll rattle off a number and this verse says this and that, and they can do it frontwards and backwards. But it doesn't mean they have a shred of understanding. I've come to learn that. I used to be impressed and listen to people who, you know, and they could translate this language and that language and everything. But I came to find that the most, who seemed the most knowledgeable, had the least understanding in a lot of cases. So now, like if I go on YouTube or something and I see, you know, some of these scholars, some of them self-taught, and they're extremely knowledgeable and stuff, I might listen to what they have to say, but I'm going to compare. I'm going to compare to the Quran, and I'm also going to compare to as much information I can get from what the hadiths and the scholars of long ago had to say, especially of the imams, of the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. To me, that's you gotta search for that chain of authority, you know, because there's radicals out there that can lead you in many wrong directions, you know. And nowhere do I believe that going and blowing yourself up is what Allah, you know, has ordained as the best thing for you as a Muslim to do, you know. So, you know, you cannot, in, you know, just saying becoming a Muslim and you've read the Quran, all of a sudden now you're an expert, you know, and can consider going or preach that people should go and kill innocent people. That's to me that's not jihad, because at once, you know, like here I am, I become a Muslim. Now what? Now I'm going to go kill somebody. In the Quran it says, "Do not kill. You do not know who Allah wants to save." So how are you going to go and to kill somebody, a non-believer? You know, when once, you know, maybe a month, maybe a year ago, you were also a non-believer. You know, or how are you going to go? You know, there's lots of conflicts with Muslim against Muslim. Now you're going to go join some force and kill other Muslims? You know, I'm a white guy from America, and would it seem right for me to go and join one of these groups in Syria? No, it wouldn't. And kill an Arab Muslim whose family has been Muslims for generation after generation? Come on, man, use your head. No matter where you're from, Europe, Africa, wherever, are you going to go kill your fellow Muslims who were Muslims, their families were Muslims longer than you were? Does that make sense to you? That does not make sense at all, my friend. You can't do that. You cannot do that. You know, that's the violence, Muslim against Muslim violence has to end. You know, it has to end. There has to be reconciliation wherever possible. You know, whether it's Sunni Shia or Sunni group against Sunni group or Shia group against Shia, wherever it is, whatever it is, you know, Allah gave us minds and intellect and hearts to be able to talk and convey with each other and explain things to each other. You know, the violence is the absolute last resort. You know, and sometimes, as hard as it might be, maybe vengeance